And we're in. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to ULT San Diego for the Aquarian series. The title of this afternoon's presentation is Dispassion and Passion, and it will be given to us by Joe Miller and Nathan Johnston.
Thank you. So I think Joe is going to give us a little introduction to some of the ideas we're going to discuss today, and then just welcome to everybody on the full moon, Gayatri Japam. We're all celebrating the three worlds that we all interpenetrate, and looking forward to finding our way home. Another thing too, I don't know if Joe will mention, but he does know about some of the mystical background of P.L. Travers, and it's also her birthday today too. So I don't know if that'll work its way into the talk, but I'll just let Joe get started.
What else is happening this week, Nathan?
Oh yeah, well, yeah, right. We've got a big day on the 11th, if you ask me, because that's HPB's birthday, right? In 1831, they're born in Ukraine, and lived quite a full life. Gave us all plenty of things to think about. And then Schrodinger on Tuesday the 12th. This is a person who, I mean, when we think about dispassion and passion, I mean, they're not there. Just depends on the observer, I think. What else is happening?
What about Friday?
Well, Friday. Wow, that's been a long time, huh? About 5,000 years ago, Krishna Janmashtami this is Sri Krishna's birthday on Friday, and also Indian Independence Day. I'm not too familiar with Sri Aurobindo Ghose, but that's certainly a special day, and that's like how could it be? We're going to go through like an entire quarter cycle of the moon in this first week, and it starts today. Well, full moon, and then we're gonna slowly shed our illusions, and we'll get about a quarter of the way there, right? By Friday.
Thank you, Nathan. Okay, well, I think I will give a few opening comments, and then I think Nathan and I are going to question each other and have a discussion about this. This is billed as a conversation, not a monologue. So that's a high mark for Theosophists. So we'll see if we can hit the mark. And then, of course, we'll open it up to all of your discussions. And as is usual, there's room for an opening reading, and I chose one about a minute and a half ago. This is from chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. The tumultuous senses and organs hurry away by force. The heart, even of the wise man who striveth after perfection. Let a man, restraining all these, remain in devotion at rest in me, his true self. For he who hath his senses and organs in control possesses spiritual knowledge. He who attendeth to the inclinations of the senses, in them hath a concern. From this concern is created passion. From passion, anger. From anger is produced delusion. From delusion, a loss of memory. From the loss of memory, loss of discrimination. And from loss of discrimination, loss of all. But he who, free from attachment or repulsion for objects, experienceth them through the senses and organs, with his heart obedient to his will, attains to tranquility of thought. Okay. So this is a theme that is at the very heart of what it is to be human, at the very heart of the human struggle. It's truly a classical theme. You find it in the New Testament, in the Old Testament. You find it in Platonic thought, in Pythagorean thought, obviously in Hindu and Buddhist thought, because it goes to the very core, as we said, of what it is to be human. And um, in fact, remember at the end of chapter 3 of the Gita, that's when Arjuna asks that question: by what, O descendant of Vrishni, is man propelled to commit offenses, seemingly against his will, as if constrained by some secret force? And Krishna's answer is, it is lust which instigates him. It is passion sprung from the quality of rajas, insatiable, full of sin. And then he says, know this to be the enemy of man on earth. And of course, this is all framed within a war, within a battle that is allegorical. At its very heart, this is right. Arjuna here is poised against Duryodhana and the army of the Kurus, but Krishna's saying, that's not the real enemy. The real enemy on earth is passion, is rajas. So, so this is, as we said, an eternal theme. And remember, in the Voice of the Silence, before the 7 portals are enumerated, we're told the Paramita heights are crossed by a still steeper path. Thou hast to fight thy way through portal 7, 7 strongholds held by cruel, crafty powers, passions incarnate. So, I think one of the great things about the theosophical approach, as any of these systems that come from a science of spirituality, they give a very careful analysis of human nature. They don't simply say, well, the devil's telling you to do it and you just have to resist. They don't just put it into a battle of will and a kind of reinforcement of personal agency and some fight that fails, and then there's guilt, and then there's reaction from guilt, and then there's escapism, and then there's going back to the passions and all of that stuff that a superficial sort of, superficial goodness and virtue kind of approach doesn't really penetrate with the understanding. And therefore, in the theosophical approach, we're told about the principles of human nature and where passion resides. And I think at the outset, I would say probably the bottom line, for me at least, might as well get it out here at the start so I don't come to the end of the meeting and never say it. But the bottom line is that from a theosophical standpoint, the reason the passions are a problem is because they interfere with the current of higher awareness and feeling that is the signature of being a human being. That really, we're here for a reason. We're here to cultivate that higher nature. We're here to allow that higher nature to shine within us, to evolve within us, and to release its power and its glory and its insight and its wisdom and its service. And that's what we're here for. The passions interfere with that. That's the problem. They block that. They become poor substitutes for that. And of course, these passions they're not bad. They're not the devil in us. They, we're with a cool head, we're to look at them and see that they're sort of nature spirits. They're the animating forces that have particular functions for what it means to have a body in the world. Whether those functions are psychological or physiological, whatever, they all have their place, and they all have their particular gratification. And it's really a matter of proportion and balance. It's not a matter of strangling oneself and demonizing something and, with some sort of iron hand of repression, which creates all kinds of psychological difficulties. And it can never be solved on those terms. That's why we need this larger standpoint. And we can only really begin to vanquish the passions when we begin to experience the higher passion, the higher enthusiasm. Enthusiasm means, the energy of the God within. As we experience that and as we gain a taste for that, then we naturally want to self-study and curb and control and limit anything that gets in the way of that, because that is so gratifying. Yeah, that is gratifying for, for a true sense. It's gratification is good in desire. That is, there has to be a kind of a fundamental assent, a yes, in the core of our being to truth and fitness and the fitness of things, and to the strength and power that goes with that. It's like in Forster's novel, A Room with a View. You all might remember the movie, where young George Emerson, while he's in Europe, he climbs a tree and he shouts at the top of his lungs, "Yes, yes, yes!" And he's sounding the great cosmic yes. And there's something in our being that wants to do that wants to sound that yes. But we can't do that while we're fractured into a million pieces, and while our loyalty is divided up into a lot of other things. And of course, what happens with the human being is we, like on a cloudy day blocking the sun, we if we are not in touch with that higher nature, then we feel there's something missing in our lives. We feel a void, and we become easy prey to filling that void with all kinds of lesser things. And it's good to think of the passions as sort of nature spirits, or as lesser spirits. In St. Paul's writing, he says that he speaks about being enslaved to the genii of the world, and that it's through the resurrection of the Christ within, the true resurrection, that we take our place as heirs of the divine, as heirs of God the Father. So you find this this is the occult teaching that you find. The true resurrection is where the human being can, by saying thank you to the to the passions for what they do, putting them in place, but inheriting what it is to be truly human. Okay, Nathan, what are we talking
Okay.
about? And
Well,
we can walk through the almanac quotes too.
I know. I was thinking about that, but let me add a spotlight. Well, so I want to say, isn't this just like one of the classic pairs of opposites, really? And what comes to my mind is, where do we, how do we act? What do we do? You've got this pair of opposites, but what is the synthesis? And I think I was mentioning this to you a little bit earlier, thinking about how there's a place where we can withdraw into ourselves, or into our we can rely upon the discipline that we have practiced to carry us forward. It's effort. I'm talking about effort. Like, how do we overcome the passions? Well, you don't overcome the passions by being by trying to get rid of them. You see that they are each apart. So I want to talk about being in the pocket, like a jazz musician, after he's practiced his instrument so well, and then he can just freely play and be creative after all of that discipline of practice. Or an elite athlete, it's the same type of thing in a certain sense. They're not really acting anymore. They're at that synthesis point where it's not about, speaking of the almanac quote, the lead quote for this week is related to this. It's not about what you like or what you don't like. It's just some things. Sometimes you like it and sometimes you don't. But it's this awareness that we're in the process of developing. So through strengthening thought, memory, and choice, one will become relaxed in reference to likes and dislikes, but in extreme earnest relation to truth.
Now, I wonder if and this, I don't want to get semantic on us here, but I wonder if I would consider passion and dispassion as a pair of opposites. That's kind of it. I certainly consider like and dislike, the attraction and repulsion, as a pair of opposites. Would I consider? I guess I would consider the lower passion to be an enemy of the higher passion, which HPB calls enthusiasm. I wonder, it's interesting. I mean, I suppose, I suppose you could say license or restraint would be a pair of opposites. If we could equate passion and dispassion, I suppose, to license and restraint, could be?
I suppose so, but the piece that stuck to me was like it was about the effort. How when you um, how there's an effortlessness to transcending concern over whether you're being overcome by your passions, or then also there's oftentimes people might think that suffering or that dispassion is somehow being detached and aloof, or this sort of thing, or kind of.
Yeah. Okay. No. It's good. It's good, and I want to pick up on that. So the pocket or the flow state you were talking about. That's interesting to bring that into the subject. It isn't something I first thought of, but there is a paradox here about effort, about effortless effort, and about how much effort is one going to. I was listening to I like listening to some of the progressive Christian preachers sometimes that come across my feed line. I don't know why they do, but there was an interesting discussion. Oh, I know. It was somebody was talking about that guy who's produced The Chosen. I forget his name right now. Anyway, they were talking about how typical liberal Christianity had sort of become non-spiritual and emphasized social issues, and conservative Christianity had emphasized a kind of a superstitious salvation and salvation that shows itself in the afterlife, gaining your ticket to the afterlife. And then he said in between that is the true message, which is discipleship. But he said, this is what interested me, is he said a lot of Protestant Christian young people in the US, if you talk to them, they will say that the Christianity presented to them in their adolescent years was about sexual purity. There was this huge emphasis on it. There were conferences on sexual purity. There were vows they took in public. There were girls who did chastity balls and held their father's hand and said, they made this huge thing out of this at precisely the time when all this is awakening in you and it becomes impossible to control. But it's clearly there. I'm sure I'm not the only one in the room who all of that in my teen years drove me absolutely mad. That all of that guilt and all of that difficulty. But so this is interesting. What you're saying. I mean, because the quote says it does talk about effort, right? It's talking about through strengthening thought, memory, and choice, one will become relaxed in reference to likes and dislikes. I like this state of being relaxed in likes and dislikes. And I completely agree with you that, when a musician has very trained vestures, very trained mechanical skills, very trained inner skills, there is a sense in which agency becomes invisible at times. It's hard to say what the agent is because they're in a flow state. There isn't a kind of there's not personal exertion and personal choice as we know it. And it's a very interesting, it doesn't that have an analogy in everyday life and in the moral life and in the spiritual life.
Yes. Well, so it has something to do with getting ourselves out of the way. We prepare ourselves so that we're not preoccupied with ourselves. And when you were talking about the scientific religious traditions, the traditions of various cultures have uh, some very specific instructions. I just think about some of the Buddhist scriptures, or even what you read from the Gita today. It's pretty simple, really. That something needs to be let go of. But like if we're out on the basketball court, this isn't. It's all in the moment. It's if we're equal to the game, then we're able to adapt to the present moment.
Now, I remember, I've been very interested in jazz, and especially Wynton Marsalis and Jazz at Lincoln Center, and his role as a historian and an instructor. But he has spoken about how um, the liberty you're talking about is on the far side of the river of discipline, not on the near side. And there's a lot of young musicians, when they hear that, oh, wow, in jazz you can play anything you want. You can just make stuff up in the moment. They hear that much, but it comes with a terrible misconception about what jazz is, and that you have to master so many scales, modes, harmony, harmony theory about chords and substitutes, and I mean, there's so much you have to, but there's so much discipline you need before you can let go at that point. That I think probably it's good to know that that liberty exists for us in analogously in the moral and spiritual life. But maybe most of us are on the near side of discipline.
But we have to be like, there's something about obedience in this. I feel to the law, to the teacher, to the teacher and ourselves. Like, how is it that we, how is it that we choose what it is that we need to focus on? I think I've tried this for many years, figuring it out myself, and I finally. Oh, it was a wonderful talk that one of our fellow students gave one time on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, where he I mean, this is one of the most profound learnings for me of the decade. But this idea that the hindrances to uh, to 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 union in our meditation, to yoga, one of them is right cognition. One of them is that, like, even if you're right and you know that you're right and you can prove that you're right, well, if it disrupts your peace of mind, then you're kind of lost, because what good is it being right if you're all agitated? So then similarly in life, with suffering as a great teacher, or if we happen to have a great teacher, there may be things that come our way that we don't really quite understand, like, why do I have to do this anyways? Like, what's so big? Why don't we just do this thing? Like, oh, so I have to learn all these scales and everything. Oh, okay. Well, listen, what is it? What is that is said about, like, complaining can get us caught up in much, troublesome karma. Um, yeah, we need. There's something about this synthesis, this effortlessness, this this affirmative, the yes, the unconditional yes that is needed. We don't have to know where we're going, but we do need to have the right attitude, the right posture in relation to gratitude for those who may know something that we do not know, and we have to put into practice what they're asking us to practice before we can say whether it works or not. And here's the thing: it's not like checking looking every few minutes to see, like, is it working yet? Is it working yet? This taps into the passion and dispassion, right? I do want to share that one of the quotes that I found from BP Wadia.
Mm-hmm. Please.
I just think it was really profound. Oh wait, do I have it? Oh yeah, here it is. He says, if we want the masters, we must observe the laws. There are many things in each of us that are not in themselves bad things. Some of them are exceedingly good, or which are comfortable to ourselves and not harmful to the world, but they may not be of any use to the master. Are we prepared in our mental, emotional, and physical natures to get rid of everything that is not useful to him, be it good or bad? We have constantly to eliminate the personal I, often an attractive and beautiful creature, for it has no place in the plan. It is depressed and must find consolation. It is irritated and must be soothed by praise. It must have attention of some kind or other. We must learn that it is the master and not the personal I who commands attention. So again, we have to get out of the way, and this meditation on this on our lead phrase, our lead quote for the week will help us with that. But he continues, most of us have psychic natures tinged with numerous unimportant and petty feelings. The disciple needs a few fundamental feelings, pure, big, strong emotions. The masters do not want only good people. The churches are full of these. They want powerful workers. The disciple must have a few dominating qualities in his astral body, all rooted in the great quality of affection, so that he, so that he can help all and is in a position to give through his affectionate nature many things that people want. So a disciple must be able to adapt himself to circumstances wherever he is put and to help in all varied environments. Therefore, are necessary in his nature emotions of character that the master can use, the great emotions of power and compassion. So it's a great simplification. We don't have to figure everything out. We don't even have to know everything. We can rely upon nature and the teacher in everyone. We can have, faith based on observable experience. That we see the struggles that people are going through, and if we stop, if we take ourselves out of the, position of thinking we know what's better for other people, or we would just prefer it if they were a different way, or we would prefer if we ourselves were a different way. Our personality, if all our personalities were more agreeable to others, or who knows what it is. We, these are the extra emotions, and it's too much effort. We can look the effortlessness, but the masters can use us if we just simplify and focus on being of service.
This reminds me a little bit of what Mr. Judge says at the end of, I think it might be Meditation, Concentration, Will. I think where he's speaking about there were theosophists who would write into the Path magazine and they want to know the secrets of will. And he says, well, will is, this power that's distributed throughout nature. It's a colorless energy, etc. He says the secret to will is desire. Behind will stands desire. But he says that if you want strong will, have fewer desires, and let those be true, pure, etc. And what Mr. Wadia says here is quite powerful. The disciple needs a few fundamental feelings, big, pure, big, strong emotions. The masters do not want only good people. The churches are full of those. They want powerful workers. So I think that's very interesting, and it sort of segues into something I think that we've sort of touched on, maybe not in these terms, is that it seems to me if we're contemplating the problem of passion, the theosophical approach seems to be saying we have to fight fire with fire. We can't fight fire with water in this case. And that is the secret to overcoming small and distracting or destructive or divisive desires is through a higher desire, through a strong desire. And remember what, I like the word enthusiasm, which of course means having a God within. And remember in the Key to Theosophy, HPB says that about in studying the philosophy, it brings on conviction, and conviction breeds enthusiasm, she says. And enthusiasm, says Bulwer-Lytton, enthusiasm is the genius of sincerity, and truth accomplishes no victories without it. While Emerson most truly remarks that Every great and commanding movement in the annals of the world is the triumph of enthusiasm. So it's, lest we, I think, lest we have some notion that dispassion means we are tying ourselves in some kind of moralistic straitjacket, and we're going to be obedient to rules and norms that are handed down to us from a church, that there's a checklist. We will accumulate a bank account of virtue against our debts of vice, and at the end, when we die, we'll get rewarded for that. And meanwhile, along the way, we may flatter ourselves with a moralistic and consistent self-image, and it puts us on a perch by which to compare ourselves and contrast ourselves with those who fail. So this is a very different view that we start needing to have experiences, I think, of the sublime, of reverence for excellence, of losing ourselves in a higher love. A love is the affirmative power. Love is the assent we make, and just as we have said yes to lesser gratifications, we can say yes to the higher gratification. And I'm reminded of, remember Plato's dialogue, the Phaedrus. That's where the famous analogy is given about the charioteer, that each of us the soul is a charioteer, and every one of us has a white noble horse and a disheveled, gray, disobedient horse, and we have to put the bit in the mouth and struggle and make it. But all of that comes in a conversation where Phaedrus is trying to convince him that love is not to be trusted because it's a form of madness. That if you're going to, Phaedrus is saying, if you're going to be involved in a love affair, you want to be involved in somebody you don't really care about. Because if you get involved, that way you can have the gratification, but you don't get all the emotional baggage. And, you get involved with somebody you care about. And so Socrates listens to him and says, basically, all that's BS. And then he praises love as a form of madness. And he talks about the different forms of, that there's initiatory love and madness, and there's prophetic madness, and there's musical madness, and of course there's erotic madness, and in fact he gives the argument that it is because of this love is a higher madness that true love is a purifying power, and it leads one to want to control the passions. So he makes the opposite argument in that dialogue.
True love.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, I'm just thinking about this whole thing. So we're on this huge journey, right? The heart of man labors towards immeasurably distant goals, I think Helen Keller said. True love. That's what we're talking about. We're in the bottom of the fifth inning, bottom of the ninth. No, we're just coming out. We're just starting to etherealize in terms of rounds and races. Our thoughts are going to be the foundation for the civilization of the future. This is like an immense. I mean, I almost feel like crying right now. I'm feeling the powerful emotion of it. Like what we do matters. Who for the future.
Nathan, what do you think about on HPB's birthday? The wonderful line of hers: the main requisite for acquiring self-knowledge is pure love.
Yeah, I want to talk about this, about pure love. I'm glad you pulled that quote, because I think that pure love for ourselves, for ourselves and for the future humanity, it has to do with I'm trying to tie these two things together, but it's okay. If suffering is the great awakener of consciousness, like this is the teacher that we all have with us, talk about in the pocket with us all the time. You can't, if we really love ourselves, if we really love the humanity of the future, we cannot constantly be talking back to the teacher. The teacher is giving us everything that we have. And it's not, I'm not saying that it's easy, the path that for any one of us or to know the way, but I don't think it. I personally don't think it. Well, of course, it's infinitely complex, but I think it's very simple.
No, I would be tempted to say we find pure love as we find pure objects of love. Is that just a rhetorical flourish? Does that make sense? It is. The more we have a perception of beauty, to put it in Platonic terms, beauty, excellence of character, um, noble sentiments, noble endeavors, um, perfect beings. You know, for example, just to take something since it's so closest right now, but what about the great theosophical tradition that's 150 years old now? And HPB, you know, if we spend years reading her writings, we begin to feel very close to her, and we begin to see what an extraordinary soul, what a great heart, this woman, what an incredible undertaking she took, and the great hearts behind her who put her up to it, and she said yes. And you know, it's the more we perceive that greatness, it evokes from us a very powerful feeling, a very powerful affection and love. And as Journay said in a meeting recently, you know, you can then, like, you know, there's the analytical meditation, and then there's the calm abiding. When you perceive that, when you feel that current of feeling, you can do the calm abiding meditation in that current. And then you can extend that current to others you know. You can think about it in relation to those you dislike. You could think about it in relation to those you know who need help. Um, so it seems to me, as we perceive what is truly worthy, the pure love generates itself. It's not like we've got to, you know, come up with the secrets of pure love. It seems spontaneous, like Krishna says about wisdom. It's spontaneous as we begin to perceive more pure objects. This love is evoked, and would it be trusted if it was calculated? If it's something we could turn on and off with a valve, we wouldn't trust it. It has to be spontaneous to be authentic and real. But how interesting that that's the main requisite for self-knowledge.
And that the teachers, and that's something that HPB said. She is like the teacher of the 1875 cycle.
Yeah.
You know, basically, you know, part of a chain of teachers going, you know, back to time immemorial, and this self-knowledge that she talks about, you know, I mean, that's something that she holds up as the promise to each one of us. But again, I think sometimes when we talk about passion and dispassion, we might have such a great, you know, like, let's just say in our current political times, and oh gosh, there's people starving and all over in Gaza, and there's wars being fought, and we think, you know, we might have the, you know, the answer to it. The answer, you're talking about pure objects. Those are not the pure objects. Those are all of the ephemera. The pure objects, like from what I understand in the Platonic sense, like that's all in the world of forms, in the world of in it's like an invisible world upon which everything is patterned. So self-knowledge, I think that pure love, it's like a child for their mother or father, or for a teacher. Like, we are totally dependent upon those who have come before to as an example of what is as an example of what is possible. And they're not kidding. Like when the Buddha talks about cutting down, you know, not just individual trees, but the whole forest of desire. That's something about passion and dispassion. He's not playing around. But But if it wasn't for him and these other teachers, I mean, it's almost unbelievable. Do you know? I mean, because deep inside of us, I've read this in the Gupta Vidya. In our time, we have a great. It's like layered into our vestures this kind of this this idea that we could be just some random collection of atoms, and if that's true, we don't really have a way forward. But if others have been that way before, I mean, that's something to love, that people have worked so hard and shown us the way, and we don't want to let them down. They've made this road for us, and it may be difficult to walk upon, but I'm telling you, it's a straight path.
Now, don't you think you said earlier about something about sorry, the AC in here is a little bit dry in my throat. About obedience, and I was anyway. Something you said reminded me of what Krishna says at the end of the 16th chapter. That's where he says he's speaking about the ordinances of scriptures, to follow them as guidelines. He who abandoneth the ordinances of scriptures to follow the dictates of his own desires attaineth neither perfection nor happiness nor the highest path. Therefore, in deciding what is fit and what is unfit to be done, thou shouldst perform actions on earth with a knowledge of what is declared in Holy Writ. Now, that seems very, I think it does say to us, while we're novices on this path, it seems to me it's easy to be self-deluded. Mm-hmm. That the passions we have that make up the personal elemental form that we have, the astral form, the Kamarupa, it has its, it enchants and deceives, as one of the quotes says. And those are the lights that we've been following for lifetimes and for years in this own life. So it can seem to we take an interest in studying the scriptures and studying the writings of HPB or BP Wadia or whoever, and reading the Gita. We're not going to wholeheartedly assent to all of that. Some of it will sound strange to us. Some of it we may say, well, I flatly disagree with that. But who is the I that's saying that? And so we need the humility, which is part of dispassion, to say, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe, what is it I'm thinking now that I shouldn't be thinking? What is it that I'm missing now that I should be thinking? What, how might I be misled about it? What more to this might there be? What are other students' experience of this teaching that they're having that I'm not having yet? Why is this put in front of me? I think we need the minimal humility. I mean, that's a form of humility, is a form of dispassion, isn't it? It's the setting aside of these drives and desires and animating forces of our personality, and of course, especially the interactions of thought and emotion, and because that's really what we're redoing. And that's slow work. Some of that has to be starved out. We have to, but it certainly becomes easier the more the Platonic charioteer. The charioteer's horses are being fed at the trough of higher quality food. When we begin to taste, for example, the joys of, our minds go to loving thoughts towards others. The more we find ourselves thinking about the welfare of others, the more we find our thought gravitating towards excellences. It's a kind of pleasurable self-forgetfulness that we enjoy, and ultimately we want to do that. But maybe that isn't available at first, or maybe for many years. Maybe there is, and there has to be this kind of trust in the teaching. And that can be a hard sell to somebody. Probably this is why Mr. Judge says nobody's converted to theosophy. The only people who turn to theosophy are those who have suffered and those who have started this work in other lives. So there's something they recognize. Otherwise, it's difficult. I wanted to also just point out one other thing you touched on, and I think the connection between metaphysics and then the exercise of dispassion and rightly purifying the energy of desire. Remember at the beginning of chapter 16, when he describes the character who has a demoniacal nature, which is really, seems like he's describing Duryodhana, not exactly to a T. But remember, it starts off with a conviction of materialism. You were just talking about, the belief that we're, fortuitous concurrence of atoms, right? But notice that that's one of the first things he says about those born with a demoniac disposition. They deny that the universe has any truth in it, saying it is not governed by law, declaring it hath no spirit. They say creatures are produced alone through the union of the sexes, that all is for enjoyment only. Maintaining these views, their souls being ruined, their minds contracted, their natures perverted, enemies of the world they are born to destroy. They indulge insatiable desires full of hypocrisy, fast fixed in false beliefs. Through their delusions, they indulge in unlimited reflections, which end only in annihilation. Convinced until death that the enjoyment of the objects of their desires is the supreme good, etc. And then it goes into the greed of their nature. Greed is a passion, of course, and all of that. But he's emphasizing that it's a form of bondage. We're enslaved to these passions. They're creating a kind of tunnel vision. The mind and its breadth and depth is constrained and narrowed by a kind of, as one goes down this dark path. They're fast-bound by 100 cords of desire, confounded by all manner of desires. They're entangled in a net of delusion. But it does. Notice he begins with the premise of materialism, which is rather interesting, because it's a fundamental kind of separation. If you have a fundamental view of life that everything is just an object, that there aren't really subjects, or subjectivity is some kind of accident of the objective nature, and you say, and then it's a very short step to saying that might makes right, and all of that, then one can see, that the door is open to all manner of mischief.
So it could be that that's like kind of, if we even just start with a certain kind of agnosticism, like that we do not know, if we just begin with that, but we want to find out. That's that there's a law at work in nature, and we may not see it from beginning to end, but Jonathan asked a question in the chat I wanted to draw our attention to. He said, what about strengthening thought and strengthening memory and choice, and how these might affect our earnestness?
Yeah, and that it relaxes one with respect to likes and dislikes. That's rather fascinating. Yeah, as if, putting it the other way, to the degree that our thought, our memory, and choice are weak, we are high-strung in regard to likes and dislikes. We treat them as ultimate. We want to fight over them. We want to obsess about them, right? I think they become less and less real. It reminds me a bit, Nathan, I wonder if we could talk about the wording of the viraga portal in The Voice of the Silence. And indifference to pleasure and pain, illusion conquered, truth alone perceived. That seems to be something very similar, isn't it? And I think what always interests me about that quote is the way that the word illusion is brought in with respect to pleasure and pain, as if pleasure and pain are kind of the marionette strings of illusion. That the more we become indifferent to pleasure and pain, the less we're prone to be illusioned, because even if they're very subtle pleasures and pains, illusion is caught up with that. And I think, another way to put this is in terms of negative freedom and positive freedom. So, right, we negative freedom, to be free from, it's not truly valuable in itself. It isn't really. It's only valuable because then you can be free for something else, right? And we want to be free for. We have things that we desire, and there are obstacles that are preventing us from them. So we want to be free from those things so we can be free for Saturday night or whatever it's going to be. But free for the higher life, free for, as I began saying, the higher ideation, the higher current in the heart. We don't want the obstacles to come in. And I think, why is it that it's the human prerogative as possessor of self-consciousness, imagination, that we can end up exaggerating and distorting the inner life. What nature does among the animal kingdoms in terms of the passion, where they have their particular functions, they have their particular day in the sun, and the animal goes on. We have we create a self-concept that then obsesses about these things. We exaggerate these drives. We become connoisseurs and curators of them, and they become very distorted because it's the magnifying glass of the divine quality within us that does this. And so, I love this notion about becoming relaxed with reference to likes and dislikes, but that comes, as Jonathan was pointing out, through. So how do you, what is it, are there definite exercises for strengthening thought, memory, and choice?
Yeah. And there's like in the refining of our emotional nature and in learning to have this kind of higher enthusiasm, there's kind of a danger, or a possibility of going astray. Like, how can we tell when that motivating spirit has crossed into a distorted or exact form?
Yes, like some, a little astral inversion or something. We get carried away by. Yes, it's a very good point. It's very humbling to think about that. But
why do lesser desires step in to fill the gap? So we'll do something else, a palliative cure, and we don't do the thing. And that's the kind of obedience I'm talking about. I'm not talking obedience. I know they mentioned about the scripture, but really, even if you are obedient to the scripture, you have to be obedient to yourself if you're ever going to be able to follow anybody else's instructions.
Okay, so rephrase that. What were you asking?
So
rephrase. Yeah.
Well, I was just saying, like, why? So we're talking about when a motivating spirit has.
Why do they fill in?
Yeah, well, lesser desires. When our meaning is unfulfilled, when we have some enthusiasm, but then perhaps it becomes a caricature of itself, and we're not really getting the nutrients of it.
Yes,
it's not really enthusing us.
Great metaphor. A great metaphor to bring nutrition in. I think that's great. I'm thinking of that scene in Jim Carrey playing the Grinch, where he says, "Am I eating because I'm hungry, or am I eating because I'm bored?" But so there's the filling the dull void within, that we gravitate to, distortions of food, distortions of sex, distortions of whatever it might be. There is that sense in which, they're low-hanging fruit. They're cheap drugs, in a way, and they offer a fix, but if you are drawn to a fix, something must be broken. That's the thing to contemplate. Is there a higher fitness that's being missed? And the problem is, as we reach for those, we just make things worse. The higher fitness becomes more out of reach because of that. So yeah, it's a very good question.
Hey guys, I could listen to this for days. I was wondering, since we only got 20 more minutes, if you guys could, if you guys even want to, open it up to the audience. And just both
Nathan,
of you.
Nathan, there's someone else in the room. I just heard another voice.
Yeah, this voice person. Sorry, it's Jonathan.
I do it right here.
Who
There's
knew?
yeah, who knew? But there's only 20 more minutes to the meeting, and I was wondering.
Okay, thank you. No, please. I think I didn't realize we weren't going till 6. Okay, please, yes, David Grossman.
Thank you, and thanks for your discussion. It really stimulated a lot of thought and ideas. I was thinking about when you were talking about dispassion, we might relate it, excuse me, to the idea in the Gita of non-attachment. It kind of goes with that. In other words, we're active and do things, but to be non-attached, we can do a better job and not get caught up in the negative passion about it. That's one side of it. And then the higher passion you spoke about, enthusiasm. I mean, that seems to be something that's really important in doing anything well in life. Enthusiasm or passion. You could call it passion, for the arts or building or farming or whatever it is in your life. People that are passionate in that sense, they're the ones that really do great things. But there's a third point of the triangle that all of a sudden struck me that maybe you could talk about a little is we have the passion and the dispassion. And in a sense, you have talked about this. The third one is compassion.
Yes.
So maybe you could talk about it in those terms, what we've been doing.
Well, that's one of his most powerful emotions, right? I wish that Kurt Gradine was here. He speaks about that so eloquent. But could you speak to that, Joe?
I'm glad David brought that up. That of course, compassion it's almost, I almost wouldn't use the word emotion for it as much as deep feeling, and it's in the theosophical scheme, it's essential to the universe. Compassion is not even an attribute. It's like the substance of reality. Compassion is no attribute. It is the law of laws, eternal harmony, Elias self, a shoreless universal essence, the light of everlasting right and fitness of all things, the law of love eternal. That's something you can meditate on for a lifetime. But it is. What, David? It reminds me of that B.P. Wadio quote that Nathan pointed out, that what is needed in theosophical work is not just good people following rules and being virtuous in a conventional sense, but there has to be a power released. And I know that A.E. talked about this too, that he quoted Judge saying, there will come a time when powers will be needed and pretensions will go for naught. So we really are talking about activating something within us. And compassion is, according to the Buddhist scheme, is the very highest motive. It's completely identifying with the well-being of another. Of course, in the Mahayana tradition, it's guided by wisdom. They're two sides of the same thing. So compassion strengthens wisdom, and wisdom refines compassion. And I think very much like what you were saying, it's connected with enthusiasm and deeper feeling and real motivation. And then I think it goes into, compassion is an abstraction, but it has to be specialized into some, environmental conviction or social justice or whatever it might be. Thank you. ULT lectern.
Yes, it's Monica. Maybe
Hi,
I
Monica.
should I turn this off?
Where are you?
Oh! But did you raise your hand, Monica? The hand was up.
You're muted, Monica. Oh wait, maybe I can unmute you, but since
Maybe Jonathan was that hand. I don't know. Okay. Please, I'm sure we're not hearing you, Monica, if you're talking to us.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Monica. Let me see if I can.
How about now?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. I'm sorry, guys. First of all, I wanted to say thank you. I would love to have heard you guys riff for at least another hour. This is just so fulfilling, and how you referred to it musically and the ideas about jazz and is just so fill the heart. And I had one idea in mind about this passion and dispassion, wondering if you might agree that this view from the standpoint of the higher self is beyond both of these two realms of passion and dispassion. And is it not true that, say, the jazz musician has to have the ability to riff, but the ability to know, like we hear all the time in live music, where's one, where's one, and so to be able to come back to that center over and over again, possibly with a new view, a new level of compassion. You just reminded me of all of that, and I'm just so thankful. But I also wanted to refer you guys to uh, there's there's uh, there's a couple of things in chat.
Yeah.
Maluka says, "How can we strike a balance between knowledge and love, and between the head and the heart?" The Dalai Lama said that a lack of balance between the head and heart creates troublemakers. So what's your take on that?
I like that trouble. I love it that it creates troublemakers because, I mean, I think about John Lewis and Good Trouble. You might want. I mean, what's so wrong with that? We might need a little trouble sometimes, but so we need to allow always that people. All of us are going through things that maybe we ourselves don't understand, but we certainly can't, from the outside, determine what the needs are of an individual soul. So I think quite a lot of us are in trouble these days for either good or bad reasons. But this is part of what we're working through. Is probably coming to that still center.
Beautiful.
Monica, the Dalai Lama said was it the tension between head and heart?
Let me see. He said that the lack of balance between the head and heart creates troublemakers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's good. I just wanted also to say, Monica, thank you for your comment about the transcendence of passion and dispassion. That's very interesting, because I suddenly thought to myself, does an enlightened being struggle with passion and dispassion anymore? I think they're above that vocabulary. Just like when Wynton Marsalis pulls out his trumpet to do a solo, he's not calculating, he's not thinking of the chords and the key and all of that. It's completely, he's just in it. And so there, I think that's an elevating and interesting thought, to think of the spontaneity of the sage. He's no longer caught in moral and immoral. It's beyond that. It's beyond restraint, because it's wisdom. But of course, the head and the heart create trouble. Yes, that because and this is what we, of course, this is modern civilization. This is the rational faculty turning the lock of materialism several turns and releasing all kinds of power that then gets immediately, we can think of nothing better to do that. Well, let's not help humanity. Let's make profit. How can we leverage this for the few? It's such low thinking. The grand intelligence, the secrets of chemistry and biology and all of that being put at the service of these base passions and selfishness that hasn't been worked out. It's absolutely, it is big trouble.
Absolutely. I remember in one of a theosophical class that it was talking about lower self, higher self, and reaching for the best in ourselves. And this person said, understand that your lower self is not going to walk up to you and say, "Hey, I'm interested in running the show here. I want to get involved here. I have all kinds of ways of pulling you away from your priority." So I thought that was kind of something that just stayed with me. So it means that we have to be the ones who are on top of this thing and know, when is it, who's at work, what part of us is at work here? And that you guys really, really have brought that idea out. Now, Jitendra, oh, I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
I want to say that this really speaks to the choice piece. We have to make an irreversible commitment, like an unconditional commitment. Like, what is it that, how did Gandhi put it? I mean, yeah.
The right angle?
Well, the right angle, but he also talked about, with satyagraha, it's not, it's an unconditional, I forget, he had a word for it, but it's,
not a vow. You're thinking about not a vow.
Certainly he's talking about vows, but this is so important, is just the choice that we make. And then as we make the choice, we're going to be met with obstacles immediately. What does it say somewhere? That the jealous
Mayan in endless space, yeah.
Will rush to challenge our resolve, and so this is why it's so important. But the first, this speaks to Jonathan was asking, like, can you speak about how this relates to the element to choice?
But don't you think? I think we have to. It's easy to get cooked, I think, in that kettle that you've just heated up. If you're not careful, I think. Of course, before even novice theosophists, the Kuan Yin pledge was presented. But no one's takes you into a room and says, raise your right hand and don't ever be selfish again. You've got to ease into that. It begins by contemplating, what is that unconditionality? What would that look like? What does that feel like? And then measuring oneself, through watching the fractures in one's devotion, and then what's truly immortal is the ability to repent and resolve and do it again, go again. That's where we discover that quality. Not so much that we're going to be, consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. We're not going to have a perfect virtue, but so there has to be something in us that I think you're absolutely right. As we contemplate unconditionality and irreversibility, it heats things up. Yes. Absolutely. And it causes, and when we, especially in some specific regard, we try to take a stand, we make a resolve, it gets tested. There's no question it does.
And then that's how we achieve balance, and that's how we get corrected, and that's how, yeah.
But we never want to, I think one of the things that has been stressed, and I think Sri Raghavan has talked about this, is we never want, in regarding our failures, which are inevitable, and we should accept that. In regarding our failures, we never want to rationalize them. We never want to lower the ideal. We always want to have the humility to recognize that, but always keep your eyes, on the prize, and never hesitate going back and sitting at the feet of the teacher, sitting at the feet of the wisdom and the tradition. Never hesitate that, because there's something within us that is unconditioned, that is unfallen, that is pure, that is whole, and that is always deserving of its turning to the light and its affirming again and again, no matter what byways and highways and back alleys it wanders through at times. And so I think that's something. That's self-knowledge, of course, is it's not the personality, it's not the karmic history, however much we have to take responsibility for that. There should results begin to occur, in us, some sense of the Atman, of this pure light in us that is wholly worthy, wholly lovable, and belongs always in the company of the wise. No matter what, it's always welcome. It's the prodigal son coming home, right? The father doesn't say, well, you can come in the gate if you pay back what I sent you. He just says, come on in, because you belong. You're the heir.
You are the one.
The pure offering.
I would like to, if you don't mind, I wanted to read Jitendra's words in the chat. Love of mother and child is nothing compared to see one divine spark. I am is the same divine spark in every physical body. So in our meditation, we start with to affirm, I am not the body, I am not my desire and my emotions, I am that am I. So that was really beautiful.
That says says
I
exactly
think
what
there
I
are
was.
two more. And
Please.
oh wait, passion and dispassion is of personality, not of heart unconsciousness, so not of the head.
Hmm.
Okay, so however that will apply to each one of us, it's beautiful. And David, your hand is up, so go.
Oh. So what do you think that talking about passion and enthusiasm in the positive sense, and you've given some examples of people throughout history, what sets a person on fire? What is it that sets a person on fire just to go for it in one area? Whether like a Thomas Edison, he was, he was invincible. He just kept, inventing and finding. There was no failure. Uh, what is what is it that what has to be awakened in us in some form to focus on something that's really from a higher higher level.
It's a beautiful question, and it's so interesting to think about. We might think about a great artist or a great inventor or a particular social leader that comes about, and it's so interesting to ask what's going on there. And one thing I think as theosophists we have to be aware is you can't look at that person in isolation and say what did they go through, because they are you know as Krishna says, and remember, I think Robert Crosby says we should apply this all to ourselves and to human beings in general, not just divine incarnations, but I produce myself among creatures whenever there is a decline in virtue and an insurrection of vice and injustice, and thus I incarnate from age to age. That is, there's a karmic field that a particular person takes, a particular soul takes on a particular body, and they're bound to that field, and we can only really understand what comes forth in them with respect to the needs of the field at the time. And certainly there's an individual mystery to it, but it's also a kind of a collective thing. But I think at the same time, your question is relevant for every one of us, even those of us who won't be great inventors or social leaders or musicians in this life, about what is it that really fires our enthusiasm. And I think theosophy points to that really as our inner life, especially as we releasing the power of meditation in ourselves, and which is really learning to love ideals, learning to settle in that current, and then beginning to experience our life and the people around us and their struggles in terms of that current. It energizes. It brings forth something where we sometimes we have days where we just feel like we're carried along, where we have spontaneous interactions with people, and there's something that's extraordinary that's happened that you just say, wow, and it's enthusiasm. Yeah. But
Maluka, I'm sorry, Joe, did you have?
yes.
I think Maluka has her hand up.
Oh, hi. That was beautiful. It was like so harmonious the way you exchange thoughts and bring a lot of things that is very important to have and feel. And I love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Milu.
You're welcome. I was thinking that the masters, I read in the Mahatma letters, it said, when they choose somebody to move forward with the work, they say they are volunteer suicidals because can you hear me well?
Yes.
I didn't hear the last word you said. You said they are
Volunteer.
Suicidal, that most of the people that work for the masters end up being killed. That Socrates was poisoned, and that most of the higher beings that they were killed or poisoned, and then Martin Luther King, Gandhi, they all got killed.
Yes.
It seems like when those persons bring, like you mentioned, what make a person so passionate, actually it seems like in another level, maybe before they were born, they had this agreement with the masters, and that's why they say they are volunteer suicidal, because they are going to, possibly they even, Martin Luther King, before he died, he knew that he was going to get killed.
Yes.
So an HPB, and they become martyrs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But HPB, they they could not kill her, but they tried to do character assassination, which is a new form of killing somebody. Because if they kill her, she had become a martyr. So it was for what is happening in the world, these times. It seems to be like that's what they do. But these are amazing beings that sacrifice for the good of all, to help us, to bring light into this planet in the cloudy days.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, everyone.
Jonathan, does that bring us to the hour? Has the hour struck?
The hour is struck. Could somebody mention what the topic will be next week?
Yes, next week, August 16th, the title of the presentation is Karma and Transmutation. So we hope that you'll come back and be with us. This was just wonderful.
Thank you, everyone, for enduring, for being flies on the wall.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
Everyone take good care. Namaste. Be well and safe.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks, Nathan. Thanks, Monica.
No, Mike.
Thanks, Ken, for being
everybody.
tech support.
Yes, Ken. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Bye-bye, all.
Bye-bye, all.
Bye.
Who is that guy? He was so cute.